Leagues 4 is just around the corner, and the theme this time around is that you have to choose one combat style out of melee, ranged and magic and stick with it for the rest of the leagues. That is just one of many restrictions we have in place, and it could be a tough call. There are upsides and downsides to all three options. So today I want to go through all three combat styles, what they have to offer and what you should pick as your go-to PvM option in this game mode. As always, we have our community Discord where we discuss everything about this game much deeper, so if you want to join us or just come say hi, the links are in the description. And also I will be covering exclusively Leagues 4 content for the next 2 months. So if you're interested in this game mode, make sure to subscribe to not miss out on valuable information. Okay, let's start the video. I want to divide this video into 3 parts and then come up with a final conclusion at the end. So if you already made up your mind about the style of combat you're going to use, you can still maybe find a few tips and tricks in your style that can help you out during your League's adventure. Let's start with melee, and right off the bat let's talk about the melee relic, which is gonna define the entire role. The relic is defined into 2 options: every weapon that is above 4 attack speed cycle and every weapon below that. The best way to describe it is that the slower the weapon is, the better DPS it's likely gonna have. There are a few exceptions here and there which we will talk about. It seems like Jagex especially wants 5 tick weapons to shine these leagues, and you're gonna see that with other combat styles as well later on in the video. For melee, the obvious 2 choices are Osmoten's Fang in Desert and Sight in Mauritania, and we will dive into all the other weapons as well. But we're not done with the relic yet. The rest of it has something else to offer as well. Firstly, if you pick this, you're gonna be immune to all venom, poison and fire breaths, which can be used in various places like Vorkat, raids, rune dragons, alchemical hydra and many others. Then your melee accuracy is gonna be increased by 50%, which essentially means you will almost never hit a 0 on any monster. Then we have something new which I haven't seen before, and that is 10% chance to deal critical hit, which doubles your damage. Now this also works with special attacks, meaning there are a multitude of ways to utilize this with god swords. Most of the endgame weapons have a special attack, even stuff like Din's Bulwark, which is an entire topic on its own. And finally, your defense is increased by 50%, which for the first time opened up to a lot of new possibilities. So let's talk strategy here and just dive right into what is and what isn't possible with this relic. Firstly, I know what a lot of people think is full Darox, because the relic offers 50% more accuracy and 50% more defense. Your Darox axe is gonna be a 3 tick weapon instead of 6 ticks. There is a 10% chance to get a critical hit, which means if you hit like a 70, now that hit turns into 140. And on top of that, our latest relic review showcases that if you die, you will respawn again and deal all of that damage to your opponent, which is a perfect relic for something going full Darok. If you include in being immune to venom, poison and fire breath, it seems like everything aligns perfectly with full Darok, and it's set out to be one of the best DPS weapons in the game. You constantly hit hundreds, you take less damage, and if you die, you just respawn again. And just for comparison, Magic Shortbow is a 3 tick weapon, so that's how fast you're gonna hit with your Darok's axe. The attack speed cycle buff in this relic is a super interesting topic on its own, because the good people in League's Discord actually calculated that items like Dragon Longsword are gonna be better DPS than Dragon Scimitar, because the Longsword is slower in main game, which means it's faster in Leagues. Dragon Longsword is a 5 attack cycle weapon, which means in Leagues with this relic it's gonna be a 2 attack cycle, and just for comparison, that's the same speed as Blowpipe. So yes, your Dragon Longsword is gonna be as fast as Blowpipe. Dragon Scimitar on the other hand is gonna be a 3 attack cycle weapon, so despite the longsword having less stats, the faster speed just gives you more DPS. And the best part is, everyone can obtain a Dragon Longsword at the start. The Naris is available to all players in Leagues, and there is a shop that sells Dragon Longswords for 100k each. So you don't even need to complete Monkey Madness for your early game weapon. And this goes for many other weapons as well. Items that otherwise you would probably never use in Leagues now have become the best DPS weapons. Like good example is Leaf Bladed Battle Axe, which is better DPS than Abyssal Whip. And the reasoning is exactly the same. The Leaf Bladed Battle Axe is a 5 tick weapon, and since the relic mentions that every weapon that is super slow is gonna have its attack cycle rounded down, the Leaf Bladed Battle Axe now becomes the same attack speed as Blowpipe. And you're gonna see a lot of this with other weapons as well. Basically every weapon that is 5 attack cycles or 5 ticks is gonna be extremely overpowered. And it's not only just 5 attack cycles, weapons like God Swords or Crystal Halberd, which are 6 tick weapons, can now be used as normal DPS options and not just for special attack. Another early game weapon could be the Colossal Blade from Giant's Foundry. The fact that it's now a 3 attack cycle weapon, plus it has a passive effect, where the bigger the target is, the more you hit. And with the minigame boost, you can genuinely get this weapon for free in 30 minutes if you pick Desert. And if that's not your thing, even weapons like Obimol or Dragon Battle Axe, which has a built-in budget super combat potion as a special attack, can be used as a replacement. The idea is all the same. Weapons you would otherwise never use in leagues now actually become kinda good to use. The damage is gonna be insane because again, like I mentioned, all the bonuses like 50% more accuracy, 10% chance to double your damage apply to all the weapons I just mentioned. Then we have endgame weapons, Soul Reaper Axe, Sight, Osmuten's Fang and few others. I genuinely think Soul Reaper Axe is gonna be the best weapon in Leagues 4. And by that I mean all 3 combat options. I think it's even gonna outshine Tumeken's Shadow, Twisted Bow, Sarah Crossbow and everything else in that regards. The Soul Reaper Axe is gonna be too thick weapon, so again, the same speed as Blowpipe. It has an amplifying boost after 5 hits, which is gonna be achieved really fast with this relic. The only downside to Soul Reaper Axe in the main game is that it's just not that accurate to justify the cost, but that's all gonna be changed with the 50% accuracy boost you get with the melee relic. The small problem I could see with picking melee relic and Soul Reaper Axe is that you essentially lock yourself into Desert, Kurend and Ascarnia. You just have to pick these 3 regions, otherwise you're gonna miss out on so many different options. Desert unlocks Soul Reaper Axe and Fang. Seiya unlocks items like Tin's Bulwark, which I think is gonna be the secret OP weapon in leagues that not many people know about, and Ferocious Gloves, which are best in slot gloves. And since there is no way to obtain Barros gloves in Leagues 4, this is a good choice. Also, we have Vardorvis in Seiya, which is the easiest way to gain the Soul Reaper Axe in leagues, and Ascarnia has access to full Bandos and full Torva with Primordial Boots and Dragon Defender, which pretty much puts your entire gear together. And of course, if you want to learn Theater of Blood, now is the perfect time to do that, because it is estimated that getting Sight from Theater takes about 20 to 30 hours to get. So this is like the final layout you're probably looking for. You can swap out for Dragon Hunter Lance, the Soul Reaper Axe, God Swords, even something like Elder Maul from Chambers of Serik. My point is that you have options with these 3 regions, plus it offers variety of different tasks, so you're never gonna get bored. Since I already mentioned Tin's Bulwark once, there is this crazy strategy that few people have come up with, and it revolves around the 50% increase in defense from the relic. Essentially, Tin's Bulwark has a passive effect, where the player's strength bonus is increased based on their defense bonus. So what players have figured out is getting full Justiciar from Mauritania, getting Tin's Bulwark along with Ring of Suffering, Fury Amulet and all the other defensive stats makes you literally too tanky to die. I think it was calculated that you can get up to 700 defense bonus with this setup and basically never die, and the best part is you still hit 60s with Tin's Bulwark, because like I said, your strength bonus scales based on your defense bonus. So you're super tanky, you deal tons of damage because the Tin's Bulwark is gonna be a too thick weapon and you never die. Stuff like this is why I love leagues. People come up with the craziest strats that otherwise would be impossible. I say let them cook. The best part about this setup is that melee Inferno is gonna be extremely AFK. Yes, I did just say that. Inferno is gonna be AFK in Leagues 4 with this specific setup. You pray mage and the max hit you're gonna take throughout the entire Inferno is like 10, maybe 15. Sometimes. But the reality is you're just too tanky and you're gonna take zeros all the time. The Tin's Bulwark has crazy special attack as well, where you hit up to 10 enemies at once. So you can just clear up an entire Inferno wave with one special attack while taking 0 damage. It's safe to say the melee relic offers tons of new ways to utilize melee weapons that otherwise don't see much play in the main game. And if you're looking for something new, I would highly recommend picking this relic, but just keep in mind that you definitely need at least Ascarnia and Desert to make it work. And then the third region, I would highly recommend Kurend, but you can swap it out for Kandarin as well. Okay, let's talk about the second choice of combat, which is ranged. Now, it's widely considered the weakest of 3 options, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I think all 3 combat styles will be fairly balanced in the grand scheme of things, but range got hit the hardest with the relic options. So let's first talk about the relic and then see what we can cook up. First things first, the same attack cycle buff applies to ranged as well. All weapons that are 5 attack or slower have insane buffs now, and all the weapons like short bows, bowfa, blowpipe, aka 3 attack cycles or faster, are not that good this leaks. Then a good news for all ranged users, no matter which regions you're gonna pick, you can save up to 90% of your ammunition with this relic, and it will also apply to blowpipe, bofa and chinchompas as well. Then we have interesting effect, which is that your enchanted bolts have double the chance to proc, and this is actually pretty broken, and we're gonna get into this very soon. Then you have 10% chance to fire an extra projectile, which works kinda like the melee relic. You essentially have 10% chance to double your damage. And finally, your range accuracy is increased by 100%, meaning you almost never hit a 0 against your opponents. Okay, well, first things first, I wanna talk about the enchanted bolts have a double chance to proc effect in this relic. There is a wiki page that shows all the enchanted bolt effects, and you can cook up some crazy stuff here. For example, Onyx bolts have almost 25% chance to proc with this relic. And if you don't know, Onyx bolts have a special effect of healing the player after proccing, meaning this basically works kinda like blowpipe spec. You heal 25% of your max hits, so let's say you hit a 50, you heal for 13 hit points. And since Rune Crossbow is gonna be a 2-tick weapon, it's just gonna go crazy, like bam bam bam, always healing to full HP. Now granted, it is not easy to get Onyx bolts as an Iron Man. There are ways to farm them like Crystal Implings, Volcano, Vorkuts and Wildy bosses, but this does bring me to my next point, which is that you don't really lose any ammo with this relic. If you also manage to get either Ava's Accumulator, the Ranging Cape or the Max Cape, you save 98% of your ammo. So let's say you shoot 100 bolts. On average, you lose about 2 to 5 bolts, which is almost non-existent. The other proc effects are Ruby bolts, which have 13% chance to proc. So that's approximately like every 8 to 9 hits. Really useful hitting those hundreds in raids or monsters with high hit points like Vorkut, Nex, Corporeal Beast, the Wildy bosses, Leviathan, Salra. I mean, I can just keep going here. To be honest, I'm shocked how easy Ruby bolts are to obtain compared to how useful they are. If you are looking to easily get access to bolts, doing few hours of Soul Wars is a very good way to supply yourself. Not only will you make extra money, but the supply grades in Soul Wars have Addy bolts, Rune bolts, and uncut rubies and diamonds in their drop tables, which is all you need to make your bolts. They even have Addy and Rune arrows if you're looking for that, plus tons of alcobols. So if you want a head start on your bolts and also to make some money, there are definitely gonna be players in Soul Wars on week 1, and that minigame is likely also gonna be on the task list as well. Why I talked about Rune Crossbow so much in this segment is that the calculators show that it's genuinely better than blowpipe with the relic, since Rune Crossbow is gonna be a 2-tick weapon, and some even say it's equal to bofa in damage, which is insane to even think about. Rune Crossbow is the same as bofa. It seems like Prifddinas is getting the short end of the stick this leagues, being the weakest region to pick from. You genuinely don't need Prif anymore, honestly. All you need is Rune Crossbow. That being said, we don't have the full information yet. Things might change. Good example is Mod Husky, who has playtested this leagues multiple times, now is planning to pick Prifddinas. So there might be some secret tech coming out in the upcoming days that completely changes everyone's plans. Other than that, the deck right now for range relic is mostly slow weapons again. We're talking heavy ballista, which is gonna be a 3-tick weapon. We're talking dark bow, which I personally think is gonna be secretly very OP. I mean, it fires 2 arrows and it works as fast as magic short bow. Plus, hear this out. If you use dark bow and you get the 10% to fire an extra projectile on both of your hits, you can hit 4 times in just 1 hit. It's kinda like Dragon Claw's special attack, but with a ranged weapon. Other than that, the most powerful ranged weapon this leagues is going to be the Sarai crossbow, which is gonna be a 2-tick weapon as well. It also has a built-in special attack to proc your enchanted bolts even with the relic. If you're planning for a ranged relic, you should definitely go for Ascarnia as your #1 priority. Crossbows with shields are the play in this leagues, and Ascarnia has Rune, Armadillo and Sarai crossbows in the region, plus full Armadillo armor and Picasian boots. Other than that, Desert is always a good pick for full Masori, and Rune crossbow is an excellent weapon to do early Dooms of a Masked raids. And then you have your choice for third region. Kandarin is an option for the Anguish amulet. You can choose Kurend for the twisted bow and the twisted buckler, which goes very well with your crossbow, or you can even pick Fremennik, which has Dragon Bolts, Ava's Assembler. And if you pick Fremennik and Desert together, you also unlock Leviathan and Best in Slot Ranging Ring. So I would definitely recommend picking Ascarnia and Desert for range relic, and then going either Kurend, Fremennik or Kandarin as your third option, whichever content you want to do the most. Okay, let's talk about the final combat relic, which seems to be the player's favorite. And the reason for that is because it has a lot to offer, and I mean a lot. Let's start with the one that's same for every relic, and that's basically all weapons are going to be faster to cast now, which includes tridents, Sangstaff, Tumek and Shadow, and even your normal spellbook casts. Most spells with this relic is gonna be on 2 attack cycle, meaning every 2 ticks. This goes for ancient spellbook, normal spellbook, and so on. On top of that, with this relic you also save 90% of your runes, and you will gain 2 items. One item allows you to spellbook swap wherever you are, so you can do crazy combos like Vengeance, Trolls, and Ice Barrage at the same time, and the other one just gives you a free rune pouch. Which now all rune pouches hold 2 extra runes. So let's say you pick Desert. You get Thread of Eliteness and attach it to your rune pouch. It now holds 6 runes in total. On top of that, your bind spells will always hit your opponents that are not frozen, and you gain a new AoE effect on all your spells, which deals damage up to 5 additional targets with every single cast. This does, however, only work in multi-combat areas. And finally, your magic accuracy is increased by 175%, and your magic damage is also increased by 20%. Yeah, there's a lot going on here, so let's unravel all of it one by one. So let's start with automatic spellbook swap. I assume this is gonna be with you at all times. I can see this being used mostly in raids, so for example, let's say you pick Desert, which if you're planning to go magic relic, you have to pick Desert. There is no other option, which means you will also likely complete Domes of a Mascot for a chance to get Elite Sword and the Tumek and Shadow. In that raid, it would be nice to use all 3 spellbooks for Vengeance, Trolls, maybe even Ice and Blood Barrage, since you're gonna be so heavily focused on magic. Clearing out something like Monkey's Room shouldn't be an issue at all anymore, because every hit deals AoE magic damage in the room. And it is estimated that Tumek and Shadow shouldn't take more than 30 to 40 raids, of course depending on your invocations. It should be noted that even though it says 175% magic accuracy on the relic, this will not be amplified by Tumek and Shadow, because Tumek and Shadow is only affected by your gear, and the relic is not part of the gear. But that 175% increase in accuracy does mean that you're able to use magic on monsters that otherwise are not possible. So bosses that have insane magic defense can now be killed with magic. Good examples are Leviathan for your Virtus Rope set, which every magic player should get, Corporeal Beast, raids, demi-bosses, like for example in the last Trailblazer League we saw multiple people just go through the entire Theater of Blood with only Sangstaff. And that's also going to be possible this time around. Even something like Nex and all the other God Wars bosses can be killed with magic. Salra, Vorkat, Mospa, Slayer bosses, you name it. And just like with melee, you can AFK the Inferno with this magic relic as well. If you have full Virtus set and your full gear setup, your Blood Barrage, which is gonna be a 2-tick spell, with the AoE attack the relic offers, has so much healing that you will always stay at 99 hit points no matter what. And finally, the most used one is probably for Slayer, since you are able to skip your Slayer tasks. With the extra points you can earn per task, you can just pick burstable tasks over and over again, and with Ice Barrage you basically have AoE spells that also does have AoE spells with the relic. It's an AoE inception here. Every single monster during your Slayer task is gonna melt. Okay, before we come to conclusion, let's also talk gear. You need to pick 2 regions for magic, Desert and Kandarin. They are just too good to pass up on. Desert is obvious for Ancient Spellbook and full Virtus set. If you don't know, full Virtus increases your Ancient spells by 12%. And like we mentioned before, even though Leviathan has insane magic defense, the relic is still gonna go through that. Then of course Desert has Tumek and Shadow and Elite Sword, which both are extremely good in a magic setup. It's estimated that you can hit up to 90 damage with Tumek and Shadow in leagues, so you don't want to miss out on that. Other than that, I would also recommend picking Kandarin, as it offers a gold necklace and Tormented Bracelet, which are also mandatory for any magic setup. And then the final region is up to debate. I've seen some magic players say they want to go Gurend for full ancestral outfit, but if you already have Virtus Robes, you're just double grinding for a set that is 3% better DPS. Also, I will say that out of all 3 raids, Chambers of Serik is the only one that requires you to have all combat styles. Like for example, in Domes of a Mascot, it's very likely you can go through the entire raid with one combat style, whether it's melee, range or magic, all work fine. Yes, there are a few hiccups here and there, but for the most part, one combat style is enough, and the same goes for Theater of Blood. In Chambers though, you need more than that. You need all 3 styles, preferably to complete it. So unless you really want to learn Chambers of Serik, I would consider not getting a full ancestral, because it could be a lengthy grind and it also takes a lot of preparation to get there. So Desert Kandarin is a must for a Magic player, and then pick whatever you want as your third option. Fremennik, Seiya, Mauritania, Wilderness are all decent choices. So there you go, I laid out all the 3 combat styles, their downsides and upsides, and what they have to offer. Currently as it stands, keep in mind this can change before league starts, that's why it's important to keep yourself up to date, but the ranking goes as follows. Magic seems to be the most powerful as the relic just offers so much stuff in general. The stats you get just from the relic just blows everything else out of the water. Melee does seem to be the second most powerful, but that's mostly because you have a lot of options. There's a lot more melee weapons in the game and the gear is much more compact, so you can basically get best in slot gear with only 3 regions. And the least effective relic seems to be the ranged one. Now don't get me wrong, it's still extremely powerful and OP relic. And if you want a safe pick, range is your best bet. The weapons are easiest to get, range is known for being able to carry people through bosses, and also there is so much information still to be revealed. We might see a complete 180 and range becomes the most OP relic out of the 3 in the next week. I will say that the early game in Leagues 4 is gonna be something we've never seen before. People who pick melee relic are gonna run around with dragon long swords and dragon battle axes, rangers are gonna be running around with rune crossbows until the very late game, and mages are heavily gonna rely on regular spells instead of powered staves like Trident, because for example, Fire Wave is gonna be a lot better DPS than something like Trident Staff. Keep your eyes open for the next week, we're gonna see some great reveals, and then you can make your final decision before League start on the 15th of November. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you all tomorrow with another video. I love you all very much, bye!